Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon.
Great suns, everyone, and welcome to Heroes of the Halcyon, the best and still only podcast for and by superfans of the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser experience. I'm Superfan Martin, and with me are...
Superfan Christine.
And Superfan Drew.
Well, we've got a great show today because we've got a great guest today. We've actually got some great guests coming up over the next several weeks, and boy, the one today is the absolute definition of a Galactic Starcruiser superfan. Drew, can you tell us about our special guest today?
I can. Our guest today is Mike Celestino. Mike is the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content for laughingplace.com, a Disney information and news site. He's also the host of the Who's the Bossk podcast that covers all things Star Wars, including TV shows, books, and movies. In his role with laughingplace.com, Mike created and starred in a web series of videos and social media content entitled Antiquities, a Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser story. This series told the story of the character that Mike created for his Galactic Starcruiser voyage, and today we're going to talk to him all about it. So without further ado, let's hear our interview with Mike. Well, Mike, thank you for joining us today on Heroes of the Halcyon. We very much appreciate your time.
Absolutely pleased to be here. I'm so thankful that you invited me. I really haven't talked about this that much, but I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys about all this stuff.
Well, good. We have a ton of questions that we prepared, but I have to tell you the very first, most important question is exactly who is the Bossk?
It's really just a play on words, a dumb pun combining my favorite background Star Wars character with the name of a 80s sitcom that you guys are probably aware of.
Very well aware of.
Who did you get to do that intro voice? Was that just a buddy or somebody? How? Because that whoever does that voice is so dramatic.
That is actually James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi on the Clone Wars, doing his announcer voice, and then he does a little bit of Obi-Wan in there as well.
That's super cool.
Fantastic. Okay, so looking at our questions, what is your favorite or first memory of Star Wars?
So my earliest memory of Star Wars actually started with the toys. You can see I'm a toy fan, much to my wife's chagrin. I'm a toy collector. It fills up a lot of space in our apartment. But I remember having some of the toys as a kid. So I was born in 1979. I was probably like 6 months old when Empire Strikes Back came out, much too young to see it in the theater. I don't remember if I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, but it didn't stick out to me at 3 years old or whatever. I do remember having the toys. Specifically, I remember having Squid Face from Jabba's palace, who I think they call a Quarren now. I had the toys as a kid, and then it really wasn't until I was like 11 or 12 that I really started getting into Star Wars otherwise. I remember my mom always tried to get me into Star Wars because I was really into other 80s properties as a kid. I was a big He-Man fan. I was a big Ninja Turtles was a little bit later on, but Ghostbusters, you can see I have the Ecto one here behind me. But it really didn't happen for me becoming a big Star Wars fan until I got the Heir to the Empire novel from Timothy Zahn. And I really liked the idea that they were continuing the story after Return of the Jedi. So then I really got into the movies at that point, and I've been a big, big fan ever since then. But yeah, earliest memory has to be the toys.
Well, as a toy fan myself, boy, I absolutely love hearing other folks have that connection. Question, whether it's something that's classic or something that's new, what is your favorite Star Wars movie or TV show?
I have a very cliche answer to this, but my favorite Star Wars movie is definitely The Empire Strikes Back. And the reason I usually give for that is it's the one that feels the most real to me. It always felt like you could really like step through the screen and into the world of that movie specifically. Like, I think the combination of the talent behind the scenes that brought that movie to life, with George Lucas as the producer and coming up with the story, Lawrence Kasdan and Leigh Brackett as the screenwriters, and then Irvin Kershner just doing an amazing job as director. For whatever reason, that was the magic combo. And I think Empire is really like the linchpin that holds this whole franchise together. I think that's the high water mark that hasn't really been hit again, but I'm still into basically all the other content. But to me, I don't think anything will ever beat The Empire Strikes Back.
That's a great answer. And boy, I don't think a lot of people really appreciate what a swing for the fences Empire Strikes Back was. I mean, if Yoda hadn't worked, that movie would have failed. And no one had ever tried to have basically a Muppet as a main character in a dramatic film. And it worked so beautifully.
Yeah, totally agreed. I have had the pleasure of interviewing Frank Oz as well. And I couldn't stop from gushing about how much I love his performance as Yoda. And yeah, I totally agree. And even like later on when they did him in CGI or whatever, it just never quite matched the realism. Again, I feel like if Yoda existed in real life, he would look and act the way he does in The Empire Strikes Back. It's just totally 100% convincing to me. And maybe that's because I grew up on it from that age. But yeah, I totally buy it, even though I know it's a puppet.
Well, I tell you what, we first became acquainted with you again when the escape, Who's the Boss? When your character took over your Twitter feed, that's when I became really associated with you as the character. So, Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what Antiquities is?
Yeah, so I knew that I was going to be doing Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser for work. I'm journalist, entertainment journalist. I focused on Star Wars as my main beat for laughingplace.com. I also cover Disney parks in Southern California. So I knew that this is the big new thing that combines Star Wars and Disney parks. I had a feeling that my boss was going to send me there, even though my usual beat for theme parks is Disneyland Resort. And this is down at Walt Disney World in Florida. Because I am the Star Wars guy, I just kind of had an inkling they were going to send me. So I knew if that they sent me and I was going to go for work, that I wanted to have an angle to cover this thing. Also, I kind of lucked out in getting to go twice for work because they did a media preview. Now, this was just kind of a 4-hour thing where they flew me down there. I got to go to the Starcruiser for 4 hours. It was basically like a whirlwind tour, and they did a condensed version of the whole story. So they showed us a bunch of the different story beats. We got to meet the characters. We got to taste some of the food and hear some of Gaia's music and stuff. So I approached that preview as a journalist, just dressed as myself, took a lot of photos and a lot of video. But then I knew when I was going to come back and do the full thing, which I went about 3 weeks into the opening. So I went with regular guests, and I knew I wanted to fully commit. And what that meant to me was creating my own character and documenting that character's trip on the Halcyon. I also came up with a backstory for that character and created a short film that was like a prologue for my trip on the Halcyon. And then that kind of led into the rest of this series called Antiquities, Antiquities, a Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser story. It's a 5-part total mini series or web series on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. And it starts with that short film. There's 3 episodes then that were shot documentary style on the Halcyon that I cut together. And then I ended it with another little short film as a epilogue takes place after my character went on the trip. And it became, I think if you watch the whole thing back to back, it is feature length. So it is kind of this little movie that I made about this character, Lodico Fendon, and why he needed to go to Batuu and how the journey aboard the Halcyon Starcruiser affected him as a character.
We've watched it back to back several times.
So, yeah, absolutely.
And for our audience members who have not yet seen it, how would you describe Lodico Fendon?
Lodico Fendon is an antiquarian. So in addition to the 5-part web series, there's also a 5,000 word short story that I wrote on laughingplace.com. That's about
Which is awesome.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
I
Thank
love the
you.
story. I love the story.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'm glad that anyone has read it, because that's, I was really pleased with myself for, it's tough to, I've tried to write stuff like that before, and it's always tough to finish them, but doing it for work helped out a lot, because I kind of have, I already said I'm going to do this for work. So that helped me finish it. And also like kind of having a deadline. But there's that backstory. It takes place, I think Lodico's 10 years old in that short story, and takes place on Coruscant. And then he's an apprentice of sorts at the Imperial Museum right around the end of the Empire. So that short story takes place like just before the second Death Star blows up in Return of the Jedi. And then he goes off and he's an apprentice to Doc Ondar after the end of the Empire. So he moves to Batuu, studies under Doc Ondar basically throughout his teenage years. And then this movie, the web series, takes place when he's like my age, so early 40s. And he has been looking for this. I don't know how much I want to spoil here.
Sure.
Yeah. Please feel free to keep it spoiler free.
Okay. Yeah. So basically he inherits this quest from Doc Ondar. If you know Doc Ondar, he runs the Den of Antiquities on Batuu and Black Spire Outpost. And that's how the web series begins.
Yeah, it was really neat because we watched the web series, and then we went back and read the short story, and then watched the web series again, and we were like, it just got so much deeper.
I liked how many things carried over from the short story into the web series.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was definitely part of the plan, because to me, it wouldn't be Star Wars unless you had to read some of the ancillary materials to really understand the whole thing. I felt like, okay, this is really, people are going to ask me like, where did this come from? And I'll be, well, have you read the short story?
Right.
So, that was a big part of why I was excited about that.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to go into spoilers, but this is literally 30 seconds into the prologue when it starts on Tython. And did you find the exact spot that they filmed that episode of that certain TV show?
Yeah, that's a fun story, actually. So the first time that episode aired of The Mandalorian, it's called The Tragedy. I think it's the second or third to last episode in season 2. And I was like, that area looks familiar where they were shooting that. It really looked like Southern California. And I knew that they were shooting The Mandalorian in general in Southern California. Obviously, most of that series is shot on the volume in an interior soundstage. But for this episode, they did go and shoot up at this place called Rocky Peak Park, which is like 20 minutes from where I live in Burbank, California. So I had it on my list of things I wanted to do, because my wife and I like going on walks and hikes and stuff. And I kept saying like, oh, we got to go and find these locations where they shot this Mandalorian episode. And I think like 6 months went by and we never did it. But finally I was like, we got to go do this. And I looked it up. Some guy had put the GPS coordinates of where all these different parts of that episode were filmed. So when it came time to shoot this episode, this web series, I had this inkling, like, what if it starts on Tython? Because it's the closest location that I have access to that was actually used in Star Wars. So as part of like a scouting mission, my friends and I went up there to Rocky Peak Park. It's a tough hike, I gotta say. You park at this parking lot at the bottom of the hill, and then you walk like basically uphill the entire time. Like it's probably like a 30 to 40 minute hike. And when you get to the top there, it's this amazing location that they found. You can totally tell why they would have used this. But it's kind of like the secluded area. Most of the shots are shot in this little valley that's not even like on the main path. You kind of have to go up and like find this like secret hidden valley. It's so neat. And once I got up there, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. We have to use this. So I like wrote that first part of the web series around that location. And I made sure to use a lot of the angles and rocks, like rock formations that you can see in that Mandalorian episode. Like there's that rock that Fennec Shand is laying on when she's got like the sniper position. That's where the part 1 of Antiquities begins, is under that rock. If you can go and match it to the episode. So
we pointed at the screen the first time we watched it and said, that's exactly.
You know exactly where he's at.
Yeah, but if you go through both the tragedy and part 1 of Antiquities, you'll see a lot of the same spots and locations used. And I was geeking out. I mean, first of all, I always love finding movie locations in general. Like, I used to live in New York. I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I would go into Manhattan and find like, oh, this is where they shot Ghostbusters or whatever. And that's been a hobby of mine, especially having lived in LA now for 20 plus years. I always watch movies with that eye. I'm always like, oh, I know exactly where that is or whatever. And then you'd go like, oh, this is where they shot so-and-so. So to be able to find that for Star Wars, you know, most of the original trilogy was shot either in Europe or in Northern California for Endor, and then in Tunisia. So it wasn't always places that I could get to, but now that they're shooting Mandalorian here in Southern California, it's fun that it's kind of more local to me. And the fact that I was able to use it and shoot there and get away with it, it really made me giddy. And you could see I won't spoil anything else, but we had some fun with it. But yeah, check that out. I was very proud of that.
So did you have a script going into the voyage? Because obviously there's some things you had to roll with the punches, obviously, but for your videos that you shot on the Starcruiser, did you have a script? Did you have beats that you wanted to hit? How did you approach that part?
Yeah, you're right. It was more like beats and lines. So I knew, because I had that 4-hour preview and I kind of had an inkling of what the story was because of that preview. That was actually a really big advantage for me, because I knew what I wanted Lodoko's arc to be. And I knew some of the observations and lines that I wanted him to make are. And kind of my approach going into shooting on the ship was that Lodoko is going to be more of an observer. Like his character personality was kind of designed around being more of a passive observer than somebody who's really going to dive in and take over the situation, because I didn't want to get in anyone else's way of enjoying the experience. Like, I didn't want to go in there and be like, oh, I'm going to do everything. It didn't quite work. I mean, you guys have seen the movie. It didn't quite work out that way 100% because of the way that the characters involved me, which is a whole other story that I want to get into for sure. But I kind of designed this character being more of like he's more of like a student of the galaxy and more like observing and drinking stuff in and learning. And that's kind of his approach to travel and an approach to his job as an antiquarian. But as you have seen in the film, that kind of gets turned on him a little bit, and that really worked out, I think, in the web series favor.
Yep, good old Wraith. Again, no spoilers, but good old Wraith will do that to you every single time.
You just can't say no to Wraith.
Exactly. No, you can't.
But to give you an example of like lines that I prepared ahead of time, like I knew that I wanted to do this gag in the bar. If you guys remember, again, I won't spoil anything specifically. Right. Yeah. But paying for the drink in the bar, that was definitely something that I planned out beforehand, because in preparation for the trip, my wife, who is very thoughtful, got me these in-universe currencies. My wife is amazing, and I'm incredibly appreciative that she got me these currencies off Etsy. So I like built that gag around having those. So I like set aside a time like, okay, we're going to go in the bar. And I also want to pay credit to my coworker, Jeremiah Good, who was my travel partner on the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. He pops up in the web series. I wanted to make sure he got on camera a little bit too, but he was a really big help in making all this happen as well.
Yeah, it was, I have to say, one of my favorite parts, again, without doing any kind of spoilers, was your relationship with Wani. I should say Lodoko's relationship.
I laughed that was quite a bit. I actually paused and laughed.
Yeah, we had to pause for a second.
Well, and again, without spoiling anything, I saw that beat on the Twitter feed and I remembered it. So seeing it on the video after seeing it on the Twitter feed was actually really fun too. So
now that you mentioned the Twitter, I just want to say that it's kind of lost to time. I mean, you could go back and find them. They're still there on the Who's the Bossk pod Twitter account, but so much of the journey was set up in the week leading up to my trip on my Twitter feed because I kind of made that part of the story. So there are like story beats that happen on the Twitter that aren't really accessible anywhere else. So you'd have to like go and hunt for them. But even after the final episode, which you guys saw, part 5, there's story stuff that has happened since then. Like when I was at Star Wars Celebration, I dressed as Lodico and went to Star Wars Night at Disneyland. So Lodico has a trip back to Batuu, and the story kind of continued on the Twitter account. So yeah, it's a multimedia, as all good Star Wars is. There's different ways to consume this.
Spread it across. That's awesome.
So what was the reaction from the cast or from the crew to Lodico?
This was absolutely the most rewarding part of Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser for me, because before I got there, I had made this short film that was up on YouTube, on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, and I had written that backstory. So the two things that had been released already were the short story about Lodico's youth and that 3.5-minute short film setting up why I'm going on this journey, why Lodico needs to go to Batuu. And to my absolute amazement, it seemed like all the characters had... Oh, and the other thing was the tweets. So between those three things, all the characters had that information. What dawned on me very quickly was that somebody behind the scenes was paying attention to that kind of stuff. And there was some kind of information. I don't know if they have like a big like whiteboard where they're like, okay, this is this person and what they're doing. But yeah, the information was out there, and each character had like a different take on it, you know, how they were processing that information and how they were using it to interact with me and incorporate my character into the story. So that really amazed me. I wasn't really expecting that at all. Like I was just really doing this both for work and for my own entertainment, really. I did not think that the characters would know this going, you know, in advance of me arriving on the Halcyon. And that was really what blew my mind about Galactic Starcruiser.
In the video, the reaction on your face when one of the characters ran by you in the dining room and shouted out to you, and just the reaction that you caught, I was like, oh, that's Mike right there. That's not Lodico. That's Mike's face right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I mean, Lodico is always kind of half Lodico and half me because I'm not a very good actor. So, yes, you can definitely see my... You know, one of the things I said to Jeremiah as we were waiting to go in, and you're waiting to go into the Halcyon, and I said to him, you know, the toughest part of this whole thing, because he was there to shoot footage of me the whole time we were there. And I said, the toughest part of this whole thing is going to be for me not to be grinning like an idiot the whole time, because I'm so excited personally to be there and to check this out. Because I'm not only a huge Star Wars fan, I'm a big fan of immersive theater. And this to me was like the ultimate marriage of those two concept. So I was super thrilled, but I also wanted to stay in character as much as I possibly could. And I think I was like 80% successful in that.
We've actually theorized on a past episode of the show about the extent of how much there's a man in the booth, you know, or eye in the sky that the cast members use to kind of get information. It's kind of interesting to theorize about.
Well, they're all wearing earpieces, right? So they're all getting something fed into their ears. And I think if you watch one of my conversations with Sammy, I think you could see him kind of catching up in real time.
Yeah.
I have a feeling somebody's telling him something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, and I'm replaying in my head, there's that one. I can see the exchange actually.
Yeah.
Well, without going into spoilers, whether this is, you know, Mike covering, you know, this is, you know, the experience as a journalist, or it's Lodico on the voyage, what's a favorite memory?
My favorite memory is you can see it. Just watch I think it's part 4, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but just watch part 4. We'll watch all of it. But while you're watching part 4, keep in mind that this is like the apex of them finding a way to incorporate Lodico's expertise into the story. And there's a moment where it becomes my, like, literally, you know, when they opened Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, they said the concept was like, you're going to live your own Star Wars adventure. And that promise wasn't really realized for me until that moment. And as that was happening, I was like, this is this is paying off more than I ever could have imagined. And I said to my boss when we left the Galactic Starcruiser, I said, this is the ultimate example of you get out of it what you put into it. And there were, you can see in my videos that there are people who are enjoying themselves, but they're kind of holding back.
Yeah.
And not really, they're not really fully dressed. They're not really interacting with the characters. They're just kind of passively watching what's going on. Now, I said Lotico is kind of more of a passive character too, but I was fully committed to reacting as that character would react in that world. So I think because of that, I had first of all more attention paid to me than probably other guests did, and then I think I got a better experience out of it because I was more willing to commit.
Well, yeah, and I think just from watching the video and having gone on the trip ourselves, of course, you did get more out of it maybe than somebody who was passive, but I don't think it was special treatment to you because they're like, oh, it's that laughing place guy, go talk to him. So I think it was, again, watching it and having our own similar experiences with some of the characters, watching your trip and listening to you describe it. You missed my little giddy dance here off camera. You're voicing exactly what we've been talking about and kind of has been our obsession and why we're so in love with the Galactic Starcruiser experience.
And it's an observation that you made a couple episodes back, is that when you fully commit, when you're in costume, you're in character, it's an invitation for the cast to engage with you.
Yeah, and we, just again to repeat, so for some people listening to the podcast who've heard it before, the characters, and maybe Mike, I'm curious if you had the same experience, because we were fully costumed and because we were fully Christine with her face paint and Martin looking like George Lucas and me just standing next to them, luckily. The Wani came to us, Sandro came up to us. We got interactions that I don't think we would have got if I just had a I'm with the Sith guy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, Mike, something I'm dying to know is what was it like covering the voyage as a journalist and as a known character in the story that was happening on the ship?
Well, like I said, I really approached that preview event more as a journalist. So that was my opportunity where I shot a ton of video. I took a ton of photos, even though I was only allowed to be there for 4 hours. That was really like, oh, let me get as much coverage as I possibly can and cover this event like I would ordinarily. Because I go to a lot of these theme park, ride openings, land openings, attraction openings. So that was my opportunity to do that. And then once I had done that, I figured, let me use the opportunity of this second trip where I had the full experience, the whole 2-night thing, to really just commit to the character. And then I had Jeremiah there, who was acting as both my documentarian in story, and also he was shooting, whatever other videos that we needed for Laughing Place and taking pictures and stuff like that too. So I pretty much told my boss this going in, and he was all in favor of the idea. But I was like, let me test the waters here, because it was still pretty much in its infancy, this Galactic Starcruiser concept. Like, let me see what you get out of it from fully committing to the character. So that was really how I wanted to approach that.
Well, and it really comes across. There's no question. So
yeah.
Well, as a lifelong Star Wars toy collector myself, and looking at your wall, boy, I'm just doing a galaxy tour behind you. I'm dying to ask, if you could get one Galactic Starcruiser toy produced and put in your hands, what would that be?
Yeah. I want them to make more action figures of the other characters. Obviously, we've got the droid SK620 has already been made into an action figure. But because I did interact with certain characters more than others, I would love to have them. I would say if I had to pick one, I think I would want a Gaia figure first. But I want all of them. I want a Wraith, Captain Kevin, every original character that they created for the Galactic Starcruiser. I hope eventually gets an action figure. That would be awesome.
I'm not waiting for them to do it. We're in production right now.
Okay. The question is, which performer do you pick for each phase, right?
We've actually had that discussion. The real answer is removable heads.
Okay,
But,
swap them out. Yeah.
But since time is of the essence, I'm starting with our Wraith, our Gaia, our Captain.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm always a fan of play sets. So that they did like an Atrium play set that was pretty much like just like a smaller scale reproduction of that. That would be awesome too.
well, and one thing that we've talked about, and I know we're going to do an episode on this of the podcast, we have a very strong connection to our Sammy, our Wraith. Did you feel that same sort of connection to people when you watch other videos or other things on YouTube? You're like, that's not Sammy.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I've watched anyone else's videos from the Galactic Starcruiser. I think because I do this a lot, actually, because I eat, sleep, breathe Star Wars. And even on the Galactic Starcruiser, I was like living that for like a month and a half after I went on the trip, because I was editing these videos and everything. When I have downtime, I just do other stuff. So, I mean, I love it. It's really my favorite thing in the world, both Star Wars and theme parks and this immersive concept. But when I'm not doing it for work, I don't really consume that. You know, there are like theme park bloggers and stuff that I know are very famous and popular, but I've never seen any of their work or anything. So I haven't seen anyone else's experiences from the Galactic Starcruiser. I actually think I'm probably going to leave it that way, because I do eventually want to go back and try out some of the other paths that I didn't get to experience. So I do know that there are obviously multiple performers for each character. I'm sure they're all wonderful and committed in their own different ways. But yeah, I did feel an emotional connection. I mean, it's kind of built in, isn't it? Because there's this thing, I don't know if you guys have done Ghost Town Alive at Knott's Berry Farm. Are you familiar with that?
Very familiar.
Very familiar.
I'm trying to get the field trip for later this summer for the podcast. Yes.
Yeah. So that's only 8 hours. I mean, I say only, it's before Galactic Starcruiser. I think that was probably one of the longest immersive theater type experiences anywhere. It's an 8-hour show that plays out through the day at Knott's Berry Farm. And by the end of that day, you feel like you know those characters and you're emotionally connected with those characters. So multiplying that by 3 or whatever at Galactic Starcruiser, yeah, by the end of that trip, getting ready to disembark and just like going up to, I guess this would have been at the end of the second night, just like going up to Sammy and like giving him a big hug. It just felt very real in that moment. Like, oh, we went through this adventure together, even though in your mind, you know, this is a performer, this is an actor playing this role. And I was doing that as well. I was pretending to be this character, but at the same time, you're two adult humans who did go through this experience together and have this adventure together. And you're kind of bonding because you're both, I mean, they're getting paid to do it. And I was also kind of getting paid to do it in a way. Sure. But we were all playing pretend together as adults, like voluntarily. I mean, as our jobs, as our careers, sure. But I would assume that all those people are into the concept at the very least and are probably having the time of their lives at the best. I hope that they're really enjoying it. And I think you can tell by the level of commitment that they have, and it comes through in the performance as well. But yes, to answer the question, definitely felt an emotional connection to the performers and the characters.
So applying as much as you can in your role as a journalist and covering theme parks, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand there might be sensitivity to this, but thinking of the experience, what changes in Galactic Starcruiser would you like to see?
Yeah, I saw that question on your list and I was trying to think of like what I would do differently. I think the big thing for me, and this is a question that I had going into it as well, was the excursion down to Batuu. Because I'm a Disneyland regular. I live in Burbank, so it's like a 40-minute drive down to Disneyland. I go there probably on average once or twice a week for work. And then my wife and I will go occasionally just for fun. So I'm on Batuu a lot. When I was on the Galactic Starcruiser and it came time to go down to Batuu, you know, my big question going into that was like, why am I going to want to get off the ship and go down to Batuu when I can go there whenever I want to? This is a premium experience. Obviously, one of the big conversations around the Galactic Starcruiser is the price. So if you pay that money and you're on the ship, why are you going to want to go down to this theme park land that is available to you pretty much any other time, especially if you're a local to Orlando or Anaheim? And the answer really didn't satisfy me in a way that I wished that it had. Now, I know there are people who had other experiences down on Batuu that I didn't get to have, but to me, I got down to Batuu and it was a lot of like looking at my data pad or my phone and going around, and I got to hack into certain panels. I know you could shut down the engine on the Ronto roasters and stuff, so that was cool. And then you can do the 2 attractions, which kind of get referenced when you get back onto the ship. So that's neat that they incorporated that. But if I could change anything, I would have either other, well, I know, so to get into the like behind the scenes of it all, I know that there's obviously only a certain amount of hours that the performers can work in each day. So having them show up on Batuu probably would be too much to ask. But I do think I would have liked to see other characters played by other performers while I was down on Batuu. That would give me more of a reason to go down there and interact with them. And that becomes part of the story as well. I mean, this just kind of goes into my criticism of Galaxy's Edge in general, that there's kind of not enough going on as far as like character interactions down there. But I do think, it was really fun. You can see it in the video that when I got to talk to not the Imperial, but the First Order officer on the Star Destroyer about being a passenger on the Halcyon and everything, that was really fun. Would like to have more stuff like that happening around Batuu. Just give me a little bit more incentive to go down to the planet while I'm on the Halcyon. Otherwise, I would rather just stay up there.
Yeah, I know we've actually had discussions about, Wani is such a slam dunk success on the Starcruiser. We've asked ourselves, what other Star Wars alien species can they apply that to, either on Galaxy's Edge or on Starcruiser itself? And one of the ones that just coincidentally, with you on the show, Trandoshans seems completely doable to us. And that's the species that's Bossk, the bounty hunter. I would absolutely love to see a Trandoshan walking around.
I've heard rumors that either Bossk specifically or a Trandoshan was part of something that they originally had planned in Galaxy's Edge. But yeah, that would be great. I remember, did you guys ever do Star Tours when they were like, it would like land on Batuu at the end before Galaxy's Edge open? And on Batuu, you could see like IG-88 standing there. I was like, oh, great, you're going to get to interact with IG-88. And I was super disappointed when he wasn't actually in the land. There's an IG droid like in Doc Ondar's up on the balcony, but he's just kind of like deactivated. But I think I would love to see an animatronic IG assassin droid.
Oh, fantastic.
So now that we've seen Lodico, and now that we've heard about Lodico, and we've read about Lodico, are we going to get more Lodico?
So last time I did Lodico, like I mentioned earlier, it was at Star Wars Celebration. They did Disneyland After Dark Star Wars Night on Friday night of Celebration in Anaheim. So I dressed as Lodico. I went over there to that. And like I said, I kind of continued the story via the Twitter, via Who's the Bossk Pod on Twitter. And I discovered that night that it was the most I had ever walked in those boots. Like cumulative amount of steps, and they really, really hurt. I was actually planning on going as Lodico for Saturday of Celebration and walking around in character, but I just, my feet were killing me, so I couldn't do it. I don't know. People have asked me what's going to happen with the character. As far as that goes, I think for now, I think I'm done with the story. I think it's going to stand where it ends for the time being. I don't know. There may be a point in the future where I pick it up, but I did want to kind of reveal on this podcast that I am going to be recording an audio commentary for the whole Antiquities series, which is going to be released via the Who's the Bossk podcast next week. So,
wow,
that's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, this episode, we're planning to have this one drop on Friday, so maybe our listeners can look for that one as well.
Yeah, so that'll be out. It'll be episode 109 of Who's the Bossk if you're keeping track at home.
Hey, this is Drew from the editing booth. Mike reached out to us after his interview to let us know that he's actually bumping the Antiquities audio commentary to episode 111 of Who's the Bossk instead of 109. So just a quick correction. Let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, you got to cover the next episode, Obi-Wan. That's probably before this.
Right.
Yes, that will be 108, and then 109 will be the Antiquities audio commentary. I'm excited to do that because there's lots of little things that I want to point out as it goes along.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, very cool.
So
thank you.
So there is one other connection that we have, Mike, that the three of us were just tickled pink to find out. So what happened is, again, when I got off the voyage, I was glued to my Twitter feed reading your commentary, which was fabulous. And just, again, it let me relive the trip within days. I literally, because we happened to be on the cruise just before yours.
Right, I remember you saying that to me on Twitter,
Yeah, so since we were on the cruise just before yours, it was super thrilling to see. And then when I watched Antiquities and saw that you were in room 4109, well, that was the room that we stayed in.
That's amazing.
So that was super thrilling, but there was one thing that happened at the hotel room, and I'm curious if it intersected with you.
We realized hours after we had left that we had left the keys in the safe in room 4109, and Disney did not let us go back in Starcruiser.
Of course not. So I was curious. Did a nice crew member at any point go, "Pardon us, we just need to get in the safe here real quick"?
Keys that left them in the safe.
I don't remember that happening, and I don't know if we ever opened the safe, so they may still be in there. But we did have a weird thing where when we checked in, someone else's luggage was in our room, and they had to come and take it out and bring it to wherever it was supposed to go. But that was kind of odd.
So that was super thrilling to see. Lodico stayed in the same room that we did. So that was really, really. Did you see where we carved into the carbon freeze?
And it was just interesting that you had a completely different cast than we. I mean, I think that we had Lenka was the same. But other than that, I believe the entire cast was completely different. Yeah. So it was interesting to kind of see different faces, different flavors of the same characters.
Yeah, that was cool.
Do you guys know how many, I haven't asked anyone this, but do you know how many casts there are? Like how many different people are playing Wraith?
I've seen 3 Wraiths.
3? Okay.
Yeah, most of them seem to have 2.
Yeah, okay. And for whatever reason, we found, Martin and Christine found at a Star Wars Celebration when they talked to the Imagineers, that our Wraith, that we affectionately refer to as Hippie Wraith.
Hippie Wraith.
Hippie Wraith was actually kind of a stand-in.
A stand-in.
And was asked to join because there was some sort of scheduling conflict for either the Wraith that you had, or what we like to call Joe Rohde Wraith. So, but yeah, everybody else seems to have 2 for each role. Well, cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in the machinations, the behind the scenes operations of the Galactic Starcruiser at the Disney Parks panel at Celebration. I don't know if you guys did that, but they showed like the story paths, the whole chart of how all the story paths diverge and come back together. And I really want to go through that and just kind of like pick it all apart.
I know. So many lines, so many colors. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That chaos that you see is what it feels like when you're in it.
Right.
Are you planning to go back?
My boss has actually talked to me about that. He basically wants me to pitch him a reason why I should go back. And my pitch was that I want to do the dark side because I feel like I really missed out. My other big complaint about about Galactic Starcruiser, not that it is really a complaint, but it's like every time I was doing something, I like turned around and looked on the other side of the room or the atrium or wherever I was. And there were things going on that I was not participating in. And I felt like I was missing out on that. But at the same time, that makes you feel like, oh, there's so much happening here that I could come back multiple times and never get the same story. Probably take you like 5 times to really get a repeat of what you've already seen. So yeah, I do want to go back, and we're talking about maybe on the 1-year anniversary, maybe I'll go back and do the dark side path. And my angle will kind of be like, how has Galactic Starcruiser evolved overall in the years since it's been open? And then also like, what was it like to do the opposite Well, when I got there, my intent was to do the resistance path, but as you saw, I kind of got pulled in a different direction. But I do want to do I want to hang out with the First Order officer more because he seemed like a lot of fun.
May I put in a nomination that you should call your new character Wodico? Just put a W in front.
It's like Wario.
Exactly.
It works for Mario, yeah.
Exactly. Well, Mike, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It has been
Yeah, what Drew said.
This is an audio medium, so people can't see me squealing with joy and squeezing my fingernails into my hands just because you've said all the things that we feel. And it's so great to talk about it with somebody who's gone through it and has some of the insights that you do. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm thrilled to talk about it. I really want more people to see it. That would be my wish. I hope that you guys can help get the word out because only a few thousand people have seen this. So as many people as are interested, I hope will go and check it out.
And if listeners want to find you elsewhere on the web, where can they find you?
Well, I'm always contributing to laughingplace.com. I write most of their Star Wars reviews and stuff. And then you can listen to my podcast called Who's the Bossk? And that's on Twitter as well at Who's the Bossk Pod. But you can find the podcast wherever you download your podcast. It's Bossk with 2 S's and a K, if you don't know that already.
Very cool.
Which you should.
Well, thanks again, Mike.
Sure.
All right, Drew again from the editing booth. We had so much fun talking with Mike that we completely forgot to record our outro. So instead of Christine, Martin, and I, this week you're just stuck with me for the outro. That was our interview with Mike Celestino from laughingplace.com, the Who's the Bossk podcast, and his 5-part web series, Antiquities, a Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser story. You can find that on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. If you'd like to contact the Heroes of the Halcyon podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at Halcyon_heroes, on Instagram, we're Heroes of the Halcyon. Finally, you can also send us email at heroesofthehalcyon@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you about your experiences on the Galactic Starcruiser, or find out any questions you have about the experience or anything that we've covered. We do have a few more guests lined up in the next few weeks. We're crazy excited to talk to everybody, so stay tuned. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Tabuite!